All right, in preparation for mixing color, I wanted to talk about what I think of as the 5 principal causes of color. That is, the reasons why we sort of see the color that we see without getting scientific about it. Just what are those elements that contribute to how we judge a color to be what it is. So the first of those is what I call local color, and that's simply the color, the base color that the object is made out of, or painted. So, like when I look at this vase, it's painted a violet paint. So that's the local colors, that violet. Irrespective of the other 4 elements that can affect the quality of that violet, that's sort of the underlying color that we begin to judge that this base color by, or this green here, right? So when we get to objects that are a little bit more neutral in terms of their color impact, like that violet is very definite, or this orange or this red. But the statue there is, it's a white plaster statue, and so, white, I've asked you guys not to think of white as just white, but white as a color on the color wheel. And so the more neutral objects, how we judge those colors are affected a little bit more by these other elements that I'll talk about, because the local color is not so strong in terms of how it registers on the color wheel. In this light, this is, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but there's a cool light coming in. So if I had to put this white into a color camp, I would put it in a very light blue. That's where I would start to sort of think about that. And it's different when you get on the shadow side, but in the light, that's where I would begin. But that kind of brings us to our second idea, which is that that whatever light is hitting the objects that we're painting, that light is colored. That light has a coloration. And sometimes it's subtler, sometimes it can be very strong. So the light coming in from my window over there, it's a subtle light, but it has a cool cast to it relative to, say, like an incandescent bulb or a halogen bulb. So if I put a halogen light on this, it's going to sort of take this color and it's going to really warm it because there's a lot of yellow and red. Sorry, it's a little, not sure how well you can see it, but it's yellowed this considerably. So so that really changes my beginning place in terms of how I think about mixing that color. Because of that neutral object, it's really receiving the coloration of the light, and it's the coloration of the light that is having more of an impact than, say, a strong local color idea, right? Whereas with this vase, which has a very strong color to it, this light is also having an impact on it, but I would still probably start not with the yellow, but with the violet, because that local color is so strong here. The light is affecting it and warming it, making it putting more yellow or red into it, but that still sort of base local color idea is predominant. Right? Now I can have a light source that is so strong that it takes over that local color, even a strong local color. So if I have like a red lamp here, obviously it's having a big impact on that more neutral color of the statue. But I can put it so close and it can have such an impact that it takes over the local color of this vase, and I might sort of start off with a red instead of a violet because this light source now is having such an impact on the local color. So the two are always kind of working together, competing, however you want to see it, but the local color is affected by the color of the light. And I think that may seem like common sense, but I think a lot of times when people start to mix color, they look at the local color and they're completely consumed by that, and they don't think about the light source, and they just, their brain tells them, oh, it's a purple vase no matter what, and they just start off with purple all the time. But if you want to get more particular about how a color is operating in a lit environment, you need to also think about the color of the light source, because that will affect not only light but also the shadows, which we'll talk about. All right, so the third element that I want to talk about is what's called reflected color. So I might have an object, say, next to one of these objects that the light is hitting and it's throwing that color into the object. So you know, if I have a strong light source on here, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this, but if I put, you know, a red piece of paper up here, it is going to, that red, maybe you can see a little bit down here, but that red is going to get thrown back into that shadow area and really affect the color of that shadow. So, so it's not actually touching the object, but the light is touching it. Light's hitting it, making that color bounce off into that object. So that can affect. Now, these last three effects are not going to have as big an impact on the color as the first two, which is local color, color of the light. Those are the big two. But these also need to be considered. The fourth is not reflected light, but just how you see a color is affected by the other colors around it. So if I have, you know, if I have a very strong, like cool light on this. So if I have a blue light, it's very cool. And if I put, so this piece of orange paper is the complement to that blue. If I put that behind it as a background, that orange is going to affect how I see the color of that blue. It's going to visually intensify that blue. In other words, even though it's not reflecting into it in any way, just by it being there, it's affecting how I see that blue. It's part of what's called the laws of simultaneous contrast, how colors can operate next to one another. All right, so that's the fourth. The last, which is a little bit more ephemeral, is the idea that we're all sort of individuals and different emotional beings, and we respond to color differently. And so there's an emotional impact that color can have, and it can affect how we judge color. And it doesn't mean that, you know, I look at something that's objectively green and you say, well, you know, it's red because emotionally that's how I see it. You know, it's not that, it can't be that big of an impact if something's like a red apple. You can't just sort of make it up and say, well, I see it differently because I'm different emotionally. But we all kind of respond a little bit differently to color and color relationships. And so there is that impact. It's not a completely objective process, sort of judging color. There is some emotional component to it. That's just important to sort of take with us as we start mixing color.